Almost makes me want to sound like a smooth jazz radio DJ. And you're
I like
listening
the one
to
that you played last time, man.
WBKL.
Good.
Guys, we appreciate you for coming
Real
back. The
popular.
Gentleman's Hour. Once again, we are back into your lives, into your hearts, and we appreciate you. I am Joshua Fers, and of course, as always, the gentleman of violence, Mr. Tom Shoaff.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the show.
And real quick, we're gonna go ahead and do our lovely duty and crack open a cold one.
See, ting
Now,
ting.
I don't have a fancy glass this time, but
No problem at all.
and real quick, I'm just shouting out, drinking some Angry Orchard. Um, I don't know if you love the taste of a hard cider, but I enjoy it. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers, Josh.
You know, I don't know if
All
you
right.
I don't know if you're a fan of Angry Orchard. This is the crisp apple. I like the I think I actually prefer the Granny Smith flavor better, but hey.
I
Mm.
I'm not a fan of all the sugars.
I mean, that's fair. You being an athlete, of course, I'm not. I should
it's
be
not
concerned with it, but
it's not even so much the athletic portion of it, man. It's just the way it makes me feel. It's like sugar and booze, it's the same with like if you go get like a margarita and there's hardly any alcohol in it, it's just all margarita, and it's like, okay, like there's a little bit of alcohol in here and there's a lot of sugar in here, and now my stomach's just upset. That's me on it, but just
I
one.
mean that's fair. That's fair, and I'm sure you're right. I mean, anyways, I love the taste of it.
I'm glad you like it, my friend. I'm
But
glad.
ladies and gents, we're kind of venturing off here. Of course, Tom and myself, obviously Tom from BKFC, and myself talking about fights and stuff like that. But as we talked about last week, we do have many interests, and we're going to talk about many a thing here on the show. Tonight is definitely one of those nights. Not going to be talking a whole lot about fights. We got quite an interesting topic here. And maybe you guys have kind of seen in the news last few weeks. I know last week I got kind of a big deal with the whole Earth's crust, the inner core, said it stopped spinning like 10, 15 years ago, and it was a big deal. It came out in the news. And maybe even it started to reverse going in the opposite direction. And of course, with magnetic pole shifts and all these different climate change scenarios and yada 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 and all this, it's just blew my mind. And Tom, we got to talk about this. We got to get to the bottom of it, and that's what we're trying to do.
That's exactly what we're going to try. I don't know if we'll be able to get to the bottom of it, but we will definitely discuss it and try to feed you guys as much I don't want to say firsthand knowledge, because that's probably not necessarily the truth.
Hey, listen, you know what?
Actual information as I can digest. Let's just go ahead and put a disclaimer out there that Josh and I are not professionals. We're not scientists. We're just happen to be halfway decent at regurgitating information that we've soaked in once or twice in our lives.
Hey, so, exactly. And you're spot on. We're not experts in this, but you know what? Like you said, we talked about this from the beginning. We want to talk about stuff we're genuinely interested in, because if we're interested in it, somebody out there has to be interested too. Hopefully you are. And if you are, please go ahead and hit that little like button, hit the little share button, hit the little follow button, and all that good stuff. We would really appreciate it. And I guess really, Tom, I know Tom did a lot of research. Tom read a book or two just on this stuff.
I did.
And
all right, well then, I'll just take it away. So
take it away, please.
Here's the situation and scenario. A couple of years ago, a gentleman named Chan Thomas. Well, let me rephrase. Back in the 1960s, a gentleman named Chan Thomas wrote a book. All right. And that book was classified by the CIA for whatever reason. They decided they were going to classify this information. A couple of years ago, that released during the Freedom of Information Act and is now declassified. So you can buy it on things like Kindle, which is what I did. Shout out to Kindle, hook a brother up. So in this book, he goes over many different situations, scenarios, and circumstances, but they all revolve around great cataclysms. And here's a little bit of a disclaimer. The book was written in 1965. He didn't do, it's not the most thoroughly quoted book. There's a lot of theory. Well, let me backtrack. The book is called The Adam and Eve Story. All right. And there's a lot of theory in it and a lot of idea in it, but not a lot of scientific factual backing. It's just, it's not there. So sure. Now that that's been stated, we'll get into the theory. So here is this theory, is that Adam and Eve, just like Noah and many other civilizations, were the result of a great cataclysm, a great flood. And what he's saying is that when the magnetic poles become disrupted and lose intensity, therefore the magnetic field around the earth has become weakened, that has an effect on the magma layer that rests beneath our crust. And that magma layer usually acts as almost like a plastic. It's almost a solid, even though it's very hot and it's, lava and it's a liquid. It because of the magnetism, it almost acts like a solid. And then when the magnetism, so there you go. So there's the picture that we're looking at there. The outer layers is what we're thinking about, those two thinner ones. So the thinner layer of magma, the one that's 60 miles thick and starts 60 miles deep, that becomes, as opposed to a solid, it turns into a liquid. And that liquid then lubricates the Earth's crust. And because the Earth is off balance because of the weight of the ice caps, the Earth then shifts. And when it shifts, the oceans and the wind are still moving in the direction because of inertia and momentum. They're still moving in the direction that they would normally move east to west. But now the crust has shifted around the planet. And so now all of the water and the wind are rushing over land masses that weren't previously in their way. And they're causing great cataclysms and great floods. And what this does is it essentially resets civilization. And he says that this is the reason why we don't have any writing between, 11,600 years ago and about 5,000 years ago. There's no actual writing because we were retelling these stories and trying to rebuild civilization. And then after about 5,000 years, civilization was intelligent enough to learn farming and agriculture and writing and so on and so forth, and then build up civilization again, only for it to happen yet again. And he goes into a couple of different timelines and theories. And basically what he says is that initially it happened at like 29,000 years ago, and then 18,000 years ago, and then 11,000 years ago, and then 5,000 years ago. So it has
let's pause right there, Tom. Let's pause right there. Let's jump into that, because let's talk about like the Great Flood. So obviously a lot of people are, even if you've never read the Bible, I'm sure everybody is familiar with, of course, like Noah's flood and all that stuff, right? Everybody's heard that story, or at least they've heard of it, even if they don't know the whole story. Okay.
Right.
And, you look at every civilization, every big civilization that had any kind of written text, chances are there was some story about some type of, again, cataclysm, some type of great flood, some type of
Right. Well, and that's the thing,
reset.
is it goes even deeper than that. So there's like Native American history and lore and Mayan history and lore where, the earth has been destroyed. Like, I want to say it's Native American lore where it says the earth has been destroyed 4 times and we're living in the 5th age, or 3 times and we're living in the 4th age, something like that. Just about every native, and what I mean by native is not yet civilized culture. Um, they all have stories of deluge and flood and great floods. And even now with the research that we have, we're able to study enough and research enough to where we can find cities that are still underwater.
Right.
Like in the Mediterranean, there are hundreds of cities that are just underwater in the Mediterranean. Um, and we have the technology now that we can find evidence of small floods. And if you take it a step further, we have evidence now that we can find of big floods. If anybody watches or follows any of Randall Carlson's work, Randall Carlson is obsessed with geology and he's obsessed with cataclysm and things like that. And he shows evidence here in the Americas of massive floods that came from the ice caps over on the west coast down through the Grand Canyon and into the Gulf of Mexico. And I've looked. You can even pull this up right now if you wanted to. If you go to Google Earth and you view the Sahara and you zoom in on the terrain of the Sahara Desert, you can see blatant and obvious evidence of what is water moving from the northeast coast
Yep.
down through the southwest coast of the Sahara. And the Sahara is massive. You can fit the entire United States inside the Sahara. And there's evidence, you can literally see it, flood evidence of something washing through that entire area and ripping up all of the sediment and things like that. So we can look at these things and we can investigate these things with the plain uneducated eye and see that it's there. So cataclysms and great catastrophes are 100% a thing. So yeah, so this is here in the United States, and I want to say these are this is up in like Wyoming region here, and that looks like what you'd see on a beach. That looks like evidence of zoom in enough, that's sand. That's what that looks like. That looks like you're at the beach. Now zoom out and it's like, oh, that's the entire side of a country. So again, we have the ability to view massive things like this and observe them. And like I said, scroll over to the Sahara, go to the terrain view of this. Yeah, keep going. Yep, good. Now zoom in. All right, now swing to the left a little bit. Keep going. Good. Now scroll down just a little more. Good, perfect, right there. Now on the left side of your screen, scroll out, or zoom out a little bit. Zoom out. Too much. Okay, so right about there. So on the far left side of the desert, all right, that'll be our end point, and it runs right through the desert. Yep, right there, and then it swings up. Nope, keep going to the right, and then it swings up. Yep, and then boom, it splits right there around those mountains, and then
Yeah.
keep going, and then it's like that looks like a dried riverbed,
Right.
and that is a piece of a continent that is bigger than the United States in its entirety. So yes, to get back to the point, cataclysms have happened, great floods have happened, and in some of the research that I've done, because like I said, in this book, it's not the most well researched. It's more a lot of theories and ideas and things that can't be proven but sound really cool. Um, but pole shifts do happen. They absolutely do happen. Great floods and earthquakes do happen. And the big thing on this theory, which kind of goes back to tie into what you were talking about, Josh, is that the poles, like not the magnetic poles, the geological poles. Okay, so where we consider North Pole, or
well, let's
I
stick
have
on.
that.
I'm kind of fascinated. Let's stick on this for a second. Let's stick on this for a
Okay,
second because
talk to me. Talk to me.
it's super fascinating. One of the videos that I was watching, where of course, they were talking about all the great floods, but they talked about how, and this, I guess, it kind of ties into this. But as I'm looking at this, and as these different, all the different continents and stuff at one time, I think a lot of people have heard of, like, like Pangea and all that, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I have all of those written down.
right. So, and something I just learned, this yesterday, was that wasn't the only supercontinent. There were multiple ones before them,
Yeah, I got them right here. So
right?
we've got Pangea, Gondwana, Penotia, Rodinia, Columbia, Atlantica, Arctica, Penderland, and Valbara. So there's like 8 of them, 10 of them.
Right.
This has happened numerous times, multiple occasions, which I think is very cool if you look into any sort of Eastern religions, or if you're into the Hindi religions and the Vedas, and the different yugas that we live in, and right, how like our intelligence level, very similar to this, to part of this theory, um, rises and falls with time, and how our civilization goes back hundreds of thousands of years. And very cool thought, very cool philosophy. But bringing it back to this, yeah, man, there were supercontinents. We know for a fact there were multiple of them. There were many of them. So to think that that we're the only civilization that was intelligent enough to write down information about what had happened, or to remember what had happened, silly in my opinion.
It's crazy. Like you talk about too, like, of course, like Atlantis and stuff like that, and how they think they know, where it's at, and how for their time, how advanced they were. And like you said, a great reset. How many times have we seen this happen? You said, like, the Native Americans said they think it's at least 5 times, right?
Yeah, 4 or 5 times.
4
yeah.
times. We're on the 5th time, right? So we're
Something like that. Yeah,
like we're
yeah.
the 5th, coming up the 5th Great Reset.
Yeah, fifth, eighth,
and I know this is a lot of information to kind of, especially if you've never really researched this or talked about it or anything like that. Yeah. So if you're sitting at home, or you're on your phone, or you're sitting on the toilet listening to us, which is fine, by the way, I'm not judging you. I do it. It's a lot to digest, and you're looking at it like, oh, great, this is one of those tinfoil hat conversations, but it's not. It's not really.
It's real science.
What we do know, here's what we do know, and I was talking to Tom about this before I kind of clicked the recording button here, was like, of course, nobody's saying, hey, by the way, in 2032, the poles are going to shift. It's going to be hell on earth. It's going to be like the movie 2012 or Day After Tomorrow. If you've seen any of those, it's going to be like that. Nobody's saying that per se. What they are saying is that we have evidence that it happened this many years ago, and we think, based off of that information, something is going to happen again. And like I said at the beginning of the show, a lot of this kind of started sparking interest when a lot of this information got declassified and started coming out about the whole, like, the inner core, the cores being slowed down and like reversed. And it's a pretty big deal. I think a lot of it gets overlooked because everybody is caught up with politics and day to day and things like that. And I get it. I get it, but I think it's stuff that we really need to pay attention to. I think it's stuff that we need to, be observing. And I'm not saying to worry, because obviously there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah, whole shift.
Right? Like there's nothing you could do about it. So I'm not.
Right.
This isn't like a, this isn't like a climate change, go green kind of situation. It's not like that. This is something that's going to happen no matter what. It has nothing to do with the whole. It has nothing to do with all that stuff, right? Stuff like this is going to happen no matter what. Some people look at it as, if you want to look at it from a, there's like a religious aspect. There's like a mother nature aspect of, we as humankind. Some people look at it as, maybe we're the parasite, right? Like we're the virus. We're the one leeching off of the planet and leeching off of the resources. And maybe eventually there's a purification. There's a cleanse,
Well, he talks about that in the book, actually. He
right.
says,
And I guess there's multiple ways to look at this. It doesn't have to be, like I said, just from like a religious point of view or whatever. It's man, oh man, like it almost kind of it gives me goosebumps to really think about all this stuff and think about how it puts into perspective how small of a dot we are as a human society.
Mhm.
Like in the grand scheme of, fucking everything, right?
Yeah.
Like from like the creation of everything. Like
the United States. Think about the United States. The United States is what, 270 something years old? All right. We're quite literally the youngest country on the planet.
we're literally a fart in the wind.
Right. And
We're
it's
a
like
fart in the
we
wind,
think we're
Tom.
hot shit. And as it stands, we are kind of hot shit. Won't dispute that in any way, shape, or form. But here's my point is that, like, the Romans ruled for like 1,000 years. The Greek Empire lasted for 3,500 years. The Egyptians were around for something like 5,000 years.
Right.
And who knows what type of civilization could have come up prior to them that was then completely wiped out due to these resets or these massive cataclysms. I mean, look at the scenario that we're in today. You and I are on two separate sides of the country having a conversation with the entire world over our phones or our computers.
Right.
At this very same time, there are hunter-gatherer tribes in the Amazon that have never been discovered. And
which, hell, that's like a whole fascinating story in itself.
But that's the thing, is like, if one of these cataclysms were to happen, you and I, Josh, wouldn't survive. We don't know how to live off the land.
Of course not.
We don't know how to hunt. We don't know how to fish. If our electricity goes out, we don't know how to stay warm. Like, we're gonna fucking die. But who's gonna survive? Those hunter-gatherers, those indigenous tribes and communities that are used to living off the land and used to having to use the earth to survive. So they're gonna keep doing what they've been doing, and then they're gonna tell stories about another deluge and another cataclysm, and then boom, there's your reset.
I kind of want to go back, just if I could, want to go back to this. So I've heard mixed things about this. So people will look up the Adam and Eve story, and some people say that it's kind of just BS, because, like you said, it's kind of all over the place. There's a lot of different stuff in it, right?
Okay. A lot of it's kind of pseudo. He doesn't put he spouts out a lot of things like this happened in this experiment, this happened in this experiment, but it doesn't give you like names, dates, titles. He doesn't list any scientific research that was backed behind it to explain it. It's just like, you got to take him on his word.
But and I just want to point out something simple, and something that's really weird. And I don't know, can we see? You know what? We're not going to be able to see this. I can't show you for some reason my like the address isn't showing up, but this is literally directly off of the CIA.gov website. So this is seriously, you could see it right here, declassified in part, sanitized copy, approved for release, 2013, 6/24/2013. This is directly off of the CIA website.
Yeah, so you can go find it. You can go check it out, guys. It's there. It's there for you to look at.
And
I mean,
and
what
here's also a separate conversation
Sorry.
within the conversation. It's almost like an
Please.
inception, right, Tom?
Let's do it.
Is for a government entity like the CIA. Here's one of two things. Here's one of two reasons why they would try to, mess with this book. Why they would want to classify it. Why they would want to. There's rumors of it being edited. There's rumors of it being changed from the original version. There's one or two reasons why they would want to do this. Either the story is so fucking outlandish and so like the things that are in it are so just out there and they're terrifying. Some of the stuff in here is fucking terrifying. And maybe at that time we don't want we don't want the mainstream public, we don't want this getting too big and people seeing this because they'll get freaked out. Even though let's just relax though, it's just a story. Okay, let's just say that's scenario one.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's real information at play here, or at the bare minimum, the theories in this aren't so batshit crazy. And they're not so way out there. Maybe he's close enough to what's really going on. And maybe, let's think about this too. People thought for how many years, how many decades, right? If you thought, oh yeah, I believe in aliens, you were a kook, right? You were a nutbag. Fast forward to 2000 and what, 17, 18, whatever year it was. Guess what? They have actually they've declassified documents.
No, that was 2020. That was part of the
2020. I'm sorry, right?
So like the COVID relief policy that they had released.
But my point is like they finally come out and declassify it and say, oh well, guess what?
Right.
After all,
did it quietly. They did it real quietly.
Very quietly, right?
It was hidden in the weeds, and it was one of those things that people had picked up on months later.
Hidden in plain sight, kind of thing, right?
Right. Exactly.
So I guess. What are they trying to do? Like, you have this huge government agency, the CIA. Hey, there's enough truth to this. We want to keep this thing kind of under wraps a little bit. And maybe the skeptic in a lot of us, and I think, healthy skepticism is perfectly fine. You don't want to be too gullible to things, but when you see something like this and you hear that, this huge agency is manipulated, these documents, these stories, you've heard that they manipulate these things. That has to, like, red flag. Why are they doing that? Why are they manipulating it? What do they want with it? If it's just some dumb fictional story, why don't they classify Stephen King? Why don't they classify Harry Potter? Why don't, like, you know what I mean? Like, if it's just outlandish story, classify any fiction. But they don't.
Well, yeah, no. So I feel like it could go. I can go a lot of directions with that.
You can go a lot of directions. I get it. Yeah.
I'll try to keep it as linear as I can.
Yeah.
What we have to understand about the United States government, in my opinion, or any government, all right, is that their job is not to, in the grand scheme of things, necessarily help their community or their people. It's to kind of overrule and see that everybody's following the rules and following the guidelines. And in order to do that, they need a specific agenda. And we've noticed that with the COVID nonsense. We've noticed that with the climate change stuff. We've noticed that with the Biden and the Trump stuff. Like, there's an agenda that the general consensus follows.
Which, by the way, very great topics that I'm sure we'll get to on a different episode. But go ahead, keep continuing.
We absolutely can, absolutely. But there's an agenda that like the whole country kind of has to be under and be understanding of. Now, many moons ago, like I said, a couple of years ago, they did the Freedom of Information Act, and the CIA released these files.
Yep.
During that same time period, there is a lot of interest in people like Graham Hancock and Rand Carlson and John Anthony West and people who are really interested in really investigating these ancient civilizations and ancient cataclysms and technology that was beyond the comprehension that we have today. Now, just a few months back, Ancient Apocalypse was released on Netflix. So now it's in the general mainstream and it's all in your face. Like, hey, everybody kind of knows about this.
Right.
And ironically enough, just a few weeks to months after that was when this book became real big and real popular and started getting pushed on YouTube. And people are going to the CIA page and this, that, and the other, you know.
Yep.
And in my opinion, it's just another way to keep the community entertained. This is how they get us to have these conversations, to get everybody else to sit down and watch these conversations, as opposed to going out into the world and actually experiencing life and doing things that change and so on and so forth. I feel like it's part of have you heard the old Roman phrase that when civilization becomes unrestful or starts to become uneasy, that the Caesar will then start to have circuses and things like that, you know, and so on and so forth.
So you think, and I just want to dig into a little bit what you said. So
please do.
You think that well, let me rephrase that even better. Let me rephrase that differently. Is it of your opinion that you think maybe, again, the government is a loose term, but I guess whatever you want to call, like, you know, the Illuminati, the builder, I don't know, whatever.
I'm not even going that high.
Right, but let's just say,
we're talking about the U.S. government.
Okay, let's just say, or is it of your opinion that you think that the government allows just enough of a drip feed of information to where it's like people think they're being knowledgeable, but like you said, enough to keep them like they're being entertained at the same time?
Oh yeah,
where they become satisfied, and like you said, they don't want to actually dig any further. They become satisfied. They get a nice little drip feed, and that's it. They don't want any more.
Yes, and I say that because I speak from personal experience. Like, I got my Kindle, and I downloaded it, and I read it, and then I felt like I was in the know a little bit, and I had more information in my head, and I was satisfied with the feeling of gaining knowledge and being more informed.
Almost like a dopamine feeling, like I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, like I've got some more information, I've got some more knowledge, and not only that, but now I might be in the know, so to speak. And I would say I'm more typical than the average human being. The average human being might see something or be interested in something or read something or be like, oh, okay, you catch a headline, whatever, and not put too much thought into it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The average person reads a headline and they think and that's it. They stop at the headline. But
So going to, you know, the CIA information thing, like a lot of people, like if you truly want information, if you truly want to dive into all of the deep dark secrets of the government, you can do that now because of the Freedom of Information Act. However, that's an incredible amount of paperwork, time, processing, documentation, a whole lot of bureaucratic nonsense that most people don't want to deal with. So they'll go the easy way. They'll go the convenient way. It's it's bred into us at this point, because we can do stuff like this. We can have conversations with people across the country right in front of our faces. So anyway, convenience has been bred into us. So it was super convenient for me to read this, do some research, watch some videos on YouTube, and feel like I'm knowledgeable and I'm in the know. But just because it was released on YouTube doesn't mean that that's the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And just
Correct.
because the CIA released these files in this information, again, doesn't mean that's the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So to get back to your point and your question, yes, I think that it absolutely makes sense. And if you want to maintain control in a position of superiority, you're going to continue to treat the people you're in control of like mushrooms. And what I mean by that is feed them shit, keep them in the dark.
I've never heard it put like that, but that's pretty spot on. Treat them like mushrooms.
Yep, treat them like mushrooms, bro.
Feed them shit, keep them in the dark.
Fucking A.
It's the last and I promise I'm not going to go down any type of like long tangents here. We're not going to do that anymore. But just the amount of the last, I don't know, maybe say 20 years of my life, 20 years ago, I really started looking kind of outside of the box and kind of looking for alternate sources of information outside of what we know is, because I grew up with the 3 TV stations. We didn't have cable growing up, but just 3 or 4 TV stations, and 2 or 3 of them had news at 5 o'clock, 10 o'clock, the 6 a.m. So and
the other one had the weather,
right? And like we were, most of us, a lot of them, we were all fed the same shit. We were all fed the same food.
Kept us all on the same guideline,
right? It's something like this comes down the pike, and it's interesting what you say. Like, yeah, like what if this is only the information that they allow to be out, which really fucking blows your brain. It makes the rabbit hole just get even bigger, because you're like, well, wait a minute.
Well, I mean, think about the company. Think of the name of the company who's releasing the file. The Central Intelligence Agency.
Sure.
Like it's things. It's anyway. Yes. I feel like when you are in a position of power, in a position of control, you want to maintain that power and control. We could take this all the way back to the Exodus story, okay, with the Jews in Egypt, and Pharaoh consistently said he was going to do something, changed his mind, hardened his heart, did something different, and the tyranny finally built up to a point where Egypt was destroyed and the Jews were cast in the desert for 40 years. Well, to make that more relatable to what's going on now, we are in the potentiality of dealing with a tyrannical government. And by that, I mean they're only giving us so much information and only telling us so many things. And in the meantime, in our name, in our representation, going off and doing all kinds of other things and other different things. And eventually that's going to catch up to us. That's going to bite us in our ass. But as it stands, as far as information goes, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know something's coming, or if you don't know something bad is happening, or if you don't know about impending doom or danger, you just don't know. And if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And I think that's kind of the agenda that we were talking about that's going on now. Is we are such a comfortable and complacent society overall, generally speaking, that we don't want to be informed of the chaos and the bullshit and the nonsense. It's just it's too much of a heartache and a headache.
And you think maybe too that ties into, and to kind of wrap it back around with, when it comes to like end of the world kind of scenarios and things of that nature, you think there's a part of people who want to dismiss it so easily because it's like I don't want to believe something like that really happened. Like I don't want to believe something like that exists, even though again, with this the story of what's the story of like the woolly mammoth that literally instantly froze with food in its fucking mouth, right? That's in the book, right? So
yeah, that's in this book. He
like
talks
crazy
about
stories,
there's a whole graveyard, like, and that's
right?
not one thing. In
As
Alaska,
human
there are literally
beings,
graveyards.
it's we can't even like we hear the story. I've seen the story a dozen times. Woolly mammoth froze instantly. Still, it was grazing when it froze.
Yeah,
What could it have?
still
Food in
had
its
fresh
belly,
flowers in its belly. Not
right?
not even just food, fresh flowers. Like the flowers were still alive.
So, like, as a human being, you cannot possibly comprehend something like that because we've never seen anything like that. So, I think a lot of people easily dismiss it. And again, to kind of bring it back, this whole thing with the pole shift, if something like this were to occur, the again, that'd be it.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be gone.
Mm-hmm.
This nice little bubble that we think we live in, we I guess if you want to say, we're blessed to live in the United States or wherever you live in, like this
Blessed
whole
to be alive.
this right, like this whole fucking bubble that you think you have around you, where you clock in and clock out, you go to your job, you have your family, you sit in front of your TV and watch Netflix, and you
Yeah, well,
you're in your protective bubble, and nothing can come.
we don't have a clue how vulnerable we are. Besides the fact that we're living in a shooting range,
Right.
and what I mean by that is that they're like comets and asteroids are flying past us all the fucking time. Like we don't even need anything like that. Legitimately, we don't. Like, let your power grid go out for a week,
And that's it.
That's it. That's all
Chaos.
you need for chaos, madness, and all kinds of civil unrest. Just let your power go out for enough time. But to backtrack just a second, you were talking about how people really can't fathom or understand the immensity of this cataclysm or what it would.
The kind of large scale, just chaos. Yeah.
I want to read how this book opens. All right. So this is the first page of the book.
Mm-hmm.
In California, the mountains shake like ferns in a breeze. The mighty Pacific rears back and piles up into mountains of seawater more than 2 miles high. Then it starts to race eastward. With the force of 1,000 armies, the wind attacks, ripping, shredding everything in its supersonic bombardment. The unbelievable mountain of Pacific seawater follows the wind eastward, burying Los Angeles and San Francisco as if they were grains of sand. Nothing but nothing stops the relentless, overwhelming onslaught of wind and ocean. And then it continues to go on and on and on. Across the continent, the 1,000-mile-per-hour winds wreak hell and unholy vengeance everywhere, mercilessly, unceasingly. Everything living is ripped to shreds while being blown across the countryside, and earthquakes leave no place untouched. In many places, the Earth's molten sublayer breaks through the spreads of the sea of white-hot liquid fire to add to the Holocaust. Within 3 hours, a fantastic wall of seawater moves across the continent, burying the wind-ravaged land under 2 miles of seething water coast to coast. So, I said all that to say this. You can imagine cataclysm. You can imagine the worst possible scenario you can try to imagine, and then amplify that by 1,000. Because according to this, which again, we've established pole shifts do happen. And what I was going to touch on previously was that the big controversy and the big argument right now is that the poles always move. The magnetic pole stays the same, but the geographic pole will shift.
Sure.
So our magnetism stays here, but the geography shifts this way. Okay.
Right.
It used to be that it would, in 1992, we moved geographically 9 miles per year. Now, in 2021, we move 40 miles per year, which means that we are kicking severely sideways. Which again, I don't know what scientifically that what's caused that or what's making that happen, but the belief is because of the magnetism. The magnetism is loosening or weakening, and we're reaching a magnetic lull, so to speak, in our galaxy, and so that's causing us to tilt and get real fucking sideways. Well, according to this guy, and according to actually a couple other people, Charles Hapgood and a few other people, is that once that happens, the magnetism can't keep up and hold us in balance, and then that's when the molten layer becomes a liquid, and then we snap back 90 degrees.
Right.
And when that happens, that's what causes the wind and the rain and the floods and all that other stuff. Anyway, moral of the story is you can imagine a cataclysm. You can imagine,
and not even just the weather side of things or the floods. There's also, like that magnetic field protects us from like the solar rays and shit, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
well,
there's also that terrifying, idea.
Yeah, and that's another part of what he talks about is like our magnetic field. You're exactly right. Is what protects us from solar radiation from the sun. Well, when our magnetic field is weakened and we fucking kick over, that also completely erupts our magnetic flow because the poles have shifted. So now we're going, and this is why it's called the Adam and Eve story, because it goes really into Genesis. Is how this happens over a period of 6 days, and then finally on the 7th day everything starts to cool down, calm down, and God rests.
When those magnetic poles shift, it's going to fuck up our magnetic shield,
Yes.
like around the earth,
Yes.
and the solar rays and stuff. It's going to cause, like, if there are people that are still around from all the other terrifying stuff, you're talking about, like, you think cancer is bad now, you're talking like instant fucking cancer. Like that's not an exaggeration.
Again,
like instant cancer.
Right. Yeah. And again, like I said, that's one of the things that he goes into and that he talks about. And when this happens, it creates such an offset and such an unbalance in the magnetism that it does just that. For those of you that don't, or those of us, or those of whomever in the past that didn't die right away because of the cataclysm, they then have to deal with the after effects of said cataclysm. And one of those is incredible radiation from the sun. Another one means that now that the ice caps have shifted to the equator, they're going to melt at a rapid pace, which means there's going to be a lot of moisture in the environment, things like that, which is going to cause a lot of rain and downfall. And then you add in the radiation, well, that's going to fucking kill a lot of people, so or whoever's left. So yeah, man, like there are so many things to take into effect that it's not just the cataclysm, it's the after effects, it's the literal. I mean, what he goes into in the book is it took us 5,000 years to be able to get back to a decent representation of society, to be able to just write stuff down again, to just be able to figure out a vocabulary and figure out letters so that we could write stuff down again. And if that's the case, if that's true, that's wild. That's something to really think about how limited civilization and society truly was, and how focused on survival they truly were, that they weren't worried about writing stuff down. They weren't thinking about things like that. And to take this back to one of the things that you had said, that you had grown up under this we'll call it an ideology of like the world works this certain way and it runs this certain way. And as about with about 20 years ago, you started questioning different things and asking about different things and picking up different things. You and I had talked after the fights the other night, and I was telling you that I had grown up under this ideology that we had gone from the Greek society, or I should say Egyptian, to Greek to Roman, and now we're and then through the essentially the advent of Christianity, we've now lived through, like, we'll call it the Christian civilization. Here in the West, at least, obviously, if you go to certain places, about 1400 years ago, there was this guy, and he wrote a book called the Quran, and you might know some things about him. But we're talking about more here in the West. I had grown up under this ideology that the Greeks had run shit for from basically 2000 BC to about, well, I'd say 3500 BC to about 126 AD, and then the Romans really took over, and then it was all Roman history and Roman culture until about 1300, and then after that the Cathars took over, and then it really turned into Catholicism. That was when the Dark Ages kicked, and there was 500 years of Inquisition and so on and so forth. And now we're living in the state and the scenario that we're in today. But going into this research and this information and looking at all these different scenarios, and just to touch on one thing, things like the World's Fair from the 1800s. Anybody who's got a spare 20 minutes, just go watch a video about the World's Fair from the 1800s and tell me that you think that we are more advanced technologically than the people who were able to put together the World's Fair. And then I will subsidize that statement by saying, if we were more advanced, then where the fuck did all that stuff come from? And the moral of this whole story is, I've grown up under this ideology of time and evolution running under a linear pattern, and we started off as cave people, and now we're advanced, and there was no in between. And now I'm in a situation where I'm questioning all of that. It's like there's so much information and so much to digest out there, and so much that's not just fed to you by your media and your news and whatever, that that you start to get a very different picture and a very different biological time frame of what human beings are fucking capable of. So I've also gone through a bit of a shift mentally, now that I've opened up my brain to some of this information, because it's very peculiar.
I wonder too, myself, I often just, when I stumble onto things like this, and it really, as I hope it would to most people, again, I'm not saying to, run to the grocery store and stock up and, oh my God, the world's ending. And, because we don't know. Nobody knows. Right. It could be tomorrow. Your last day could be today. Your last day could be, we don't know. Point is, I think reading stuff like this really brings me closer to, I guess, for lack of a better terminology, like your own mortality, right? Like seeing stuff like this, knowing that, again, how much of a blip you are in the entirety of civilization, in the entirety of life. How not to say you're not important, but in terms of the part you play, it's so insignificant. It's so insignificant.
Yeah.
Again, not to
Yeah.
say you're not important, but just to say that, God, like we've all again, we're all in our own little bubble. We've all got egos.
Safe and protected and secure.
Right, we're all protected and secure. We all got our nice those little darn pesky pocket gadgets, you know, and we can surf the web and social media and connect with anybody anytime we want to. And it wasn't that long ago, you know, we're in the same age bracket. It wasn't that long ago when I used to have to sit and wait by the phone for a phone call, right? It wasn't that long ago to me, but now
that's the point.
It wasn't.
Like, we're talking about 20 years, dude. 20 years.
But it brings me closer to that. You know, I guess to my own mortality, and I think things like this really, man, I don't want to get like super deep, and maybe we can save it for like another conversation, because something like this cannot possibly be like fully discussed or peeled back in one episode. There's no way, right?
No.
There's so much here. There's so many different directions we could go.
Yes.
This is
which is where you guys listening need to come in and let us know. Like
100%. Please, yeah, leave a comment, because this is definitely a tough one to cover. This is a tough one to cover because it is so multifaceted. There's so many different ways we could go. There's so many different directions. There's so many different layers. This is a tough one. Please leave your comments. If any of this, right, sounds interesting, if you've done your own research, by God, you know, put it in the comments. Tell us what you think. Leave us the feedback with that.